Good evening. My name is Tammi Morris, and I'm the Executive Director at Faith Friendship Ministries in Mountville, Pennsylvania, Lancaster County. Faith Friendship Ministries is a 73-bed state licensed personal care home. We provide services to individuals that are low income and who have special needs. A majority of our residents are afflicted with persistent, complicated, and sometimes severe mental illness. Our residents also have other co occurring medical disabilities or illnesses that they contend with. Our residents are not, quote, unwell enough to live in a locked behavioral health facility, but they're not well enough to live on their own. They benefit and thrive and do best in a congregate or community setting. So the villa has 37 rooms, and so every resident has a semi private room that they share with another resident. Resident is the state name that's used to refer to our tenants, but we call them family. And while Faith Friendship Ministries is not a nursing home or assisted living facility, we do provide services to help residents be stable and to live the best possible lives that they can live. So we provide medicine administration for those who need it and for those who want it. We provide financial assistance, case management, help with activities of daily living, showering, bathing, laundry, cleaning, food. And so, our residents are people who do better together, and they have come to form strong bonds with one another. Now, as you can imagine, a home that is equipped for 73 individuals, well, our home was built in the 1890s, and the extension or the new wing in the 1980s. Living in a smaller environment can have its challenges. And just like in our own families, there's some people we get along with better than others. And sometimes we just don't get along because our personalities conflict. Well, we experience all those same things at Faith Friendship Ministries, but because we're a Christ centered ministry dedicated to serving the most in need in this niche, we believe that we're demonstrating our loving commitment to God through loving his people, and this is how we do it. We've been doing this since 2002, and our amazing founders, Steve and Patty Deach, understood the gap in the community of services, and that's why Faith Friendship was born. That's why most ministries and nonprofits are born, out of a need that's not being met, and someone who sees it, who's compelled and called to do something about it. So Faith Friendship Ministries have served probably hundreds of people in the past 22 years. And while my tenure has been relatively short, considering that overall timeline, I count myself as one of the many blessed and honored to be able to serve at Faith Friendship. My journey with Faith Friendship started in September of 21, just several months after having brain surgery for sudden onset of a life-threatening and rare brain disease. This brain disease and the medication that I needed to take in order to treat it at the time was mainly anticonvulsants. And anticonvulsants often slow the nervous system, interrupting signals to and from the brain. These medicines over time are refractory, but one thing that they do in high doses, one thing they do in high doses is they can actually cause hallucinations, auditory and sometimes visual. So while I was raised in poverty by a single mother that suffered severe mental illness and experienced the shrapnel of all of that, it wasn't until I experienced this brain disease and the medicine that I had to take that I understood for the first time in my life what it was like to have my brain do something I couldn't control. Now, that doesn't mean that I haven't suffered with other things like depression or anxiety at uncomfortable or new situations, but I had never had my brain controlling me. And so I was equipped at the time and ready to serve such a precious but vulnerable population. You know, while we've gotten better as a society at not stigmatizing in a negative way folks that are afflicted with mental illness, we have gotten better. And I think COVID helped us get better. It forced us to look at what was happening in the rise in fentanyl overdoses and just the challenges that people face living everyday life. While we've gotten better as a society, our residents would still be on the fringe. If you're a believer, if we share faith in Jesus Christ, then I can say to you that sometimes our residents are treated or viewed as the demoniacs and lepers in Jesus' day might be. And so our residents aren't contagious and they're not crazy, but they are suffering and they need someone to come alongside of them. So we're 7 days a week, 24 hours a day, and we have over 30 full-time employees and need more. So we're heavily regulated by the state, which means they tell us what we can and can't do and should do in order to provide quality services. But then there's the matter of the state has their standards, but God's standards are higher and they're based in excellence and in love. So we strive to work towards excellence. And, you know, because we only receive about 50% of the money that we need to care for our residents, and that comes from their rents. We charge them what they can afford, not what it costs to care for them, which is almost double that. So we get 50%, we're short 50%. So what ends up happening is that because we're a charitable organization, we have to raise that money through charitable donations. And in general, and over the years, through God's faithfulness and our efforts, we have been able to bridge that gap. Now, we've never been rich, and there have been times that it's been the 11th hour. And I often think of George Mueller when I think about ministry and waiting for the funds to come in and the 11th hour having what you need because God impressed upon another person to come and meet that need. And we've had those experiences at Faith Friendship. But what I can tell you is that Faith Friendship experienced a crisis unlike anything they had ever experienced in their entire history, one that was devastating. It's in my 30 years of nonprofit experience and leadership, I've never experienced a crisis like this. But we found out in August of 2022 that a beloved, a trusted leader in the community, serving at his church, employee of ours, volunteer in the community, was accused of sexually abusing one of our male residents. Now, this allegation had to be treated seriously. So Faith Friendship acted swiftly. The employee was prohibited from entering the property or speaking to any of the residents, making contact in any way, was put on administrative leave pending an investigation. These allegations were reported by a family member of the resident to the authorities. DHS came in and did an inspection, and so we got involved in this process of internal and external investigations to determine whether or not this was credible. So during this time, as you can imagine, because this employee worked for a decade and a half and a little more, the depth and breadth of this, the thought of it was overwhelming. So while we didn't share the details of any of this with our residents because they are delicate and they tend to be afraid, and they've suffered so much in their life that any change can be traumatizing to them. So we tried to, in a discerning, prayerful, delicate, and kind way, protect them and not share the information with them that we had. And that was the right thing to do, to not also impede an investigation. So I'm kind of rambling here, but the bottom line is it took a couple of months for the authorities to do their job and to determine whether or not there was enough evidence for charges to be pressed. They decided that there was. And so in early November of 2022, we began this process of, I guess I should back up a little bit. during these 2 months, it was really hard for me as a leader. And I'm not trying to make this about me. I'm just sharing some of what happened as a leader. While I had experienced crises and things, troubles come up, things happen, people make bad choices, funds fail, et cetera, et cetera. In leadership, we have to hope for the best, prepare for the worst, and be mindful of what's needed to sustain any organization or business. So during this time, I, as a leader and as a person, as a believer of Jesus, relied heavily upon prayer, my mentors, my friends, to make sure that I was handling this the right way, and our board of directors, obviously. And while I was praying, Lord, give me wisdom. Lord, what's the next right step? Lord, what do you want us to do? How do we do this well? How do we not do this like some of the other organizations out there that hit it, tried to pay it off, ignored it, moved people to different locations? We didn't want to do that. That's not the right way to do it. The residents' well-being, the truth, operating in excellence, because we account to God first and most importantly. So I kept hearing this phrase, not audibly, but I kept hearing this phrase, remember the more, remember the more. And I heard it over a 6-week period. And I kept saying, God, I need you to give me wisdom because I don't understand what that means. Now, I think it's important to understand that I'm still healing from brain surgery. So I'm not as quick-witted as I once was, and I don't always make the connections as quickly as I once did. But eventually, and once I learned that charges were going to be filed, and that set us on a path of crisis response, to officially publicly begin, the Lord gave me understanding of what that meant. And it basically meant that God wanted us to talk to all of our residents. So what we did was we developed a few questions. We ran them by our lawyers. And then in a one-on-one interview with every resident, a lot of them, most of them were conducted by me, but all of them would be conducted by a member of management, with a member of management witnessing and documenting what was said. That took a couple of months because when you're interviewing 71 residents in the middle of the holiday season, that's a challenge in and of itself. But as we would interview the residents, creating a safe space for conversation with me to tell me anything they wanted, there were 14 additional stories or allegations of abuse that came out of those conversations. Can you imagine? 14 men trusted this person to care for them, to protect them, to be kind to them, to help them thrive and live the best life that they could. And that trust was abused, that friendship was betrayed, and they were harmed by this former employee. And so every time we had a story of abuse shared with us, we had to stop the clock and we had to start processing all the paperwork that's required for reporting abuse and notifying authorities, etc. This was a grueling process, never more grueling than what they had to go through. But listening to these stories of abuse over and over and over that were eerily similar was difficult. And we were committed, no matter what, to exposing what needed to be exposed and providing the services that we needed to provide for those that had suffered. And so over the next several months, this consumed most of our time and most of our energy. And we shared with the residents at large, just in general, not specific details, just that this employee had been accused of wrongdoing and abuse and had to deal with the authorities and wouldn't be coming back. And so we handled our communications with the residents very delicately. And the staff, as you can imagine, some that have been there for a very, very, very long time, were devastated and angry and felt guilty, as if they should have somehow seen this, and how could they have missed it? The founders were heartbroken and angry And I tried to stay steady down the neutral path of God, tell me which way to go, and I'll go. I'm grateful for our lawyers and our board of directors. I'm grateful for the guidance of the people who are alongside of me, but I'm especially grateful for the steadfastness of our staff. They continued to serve. And our residents, once they learned why this person was no longer at Faith Friendship, for those who had sexual abuse in their past, but may not have been abused by this person, it triggered their trauma. And so obviously we had to have a formal crisis response. We partnered with some local agencies, the YWCA being the primary one for crisis counseling, both individually counseling residents and staff. And we also had the opportunity for some EAP services for our staff. We lost some staff because some staff were also hurting from this and couldn't stay. We had high turnover during this time. The organization was not stable, but committed to healing and to providing stability in as much as we could. So, of course, we, through this entire process, partnered with DHS, the district attorney's office, the police department, the advocacy center for forensic interviewing, adult protective services, office of aging, and the list goes on and on and on. We partnered with them to do what we needed to do to expose this and to move this process along criminally as well. And as a result of these conversations and these stories, and after the forensic interviews were done with each of the residents, this man was charged with 662 counts of institutional sexual assault and improper sexual conduct, a misdemeanor. I think I said that right. Sexual conduct without consent. And so 662 charges is a lot. And again, devastating, but we had to continue to serve our residents and be stable for them. So over the course of that year and the following year, 2023, the one we just came out of, we raised hundreds of thousands of dollars, and we lost some donors during this time. There were some people that were angry that we would even think that this employee would be capable of such things. And when you think about it, when we find out someone that we believed and trusted and loved was predatory and betraying us and abusive and deceptive, when you find out those things, it's hard. It's hard to reconcile that. It's hard to reconcile how somebody could become so bound and so deceived that they would abuse the very people who needed them to protect him the most. I mean, that is hard to fathom, especially in the body of Christ. But there are people are people no matter where they are, and people fall short and people fall prey to the temptations of evil. And we don't know why always. My first question is, well, what happened to him that this was normal or even an option for him? How did the enemy get in and plant this idea and it become possible? I always think about what happened to the person who's abusing as much as the person who was abused. So here we are. It's February of 2024. And over the past 6 months, maybe a little less, I have been reaching out to everybody I can think of. I've been reaching out to our elected officials, county, state, county commissioners, state representatives, senators, the Health and Human Services Committee of the Senate, DHS. I've even reached out to the governor via email, phone, text. The text line doesn't work, but to ask for help. I've been asking for financial help, whether it's housing preservation for those who suffer with mental illness, crisis or emergency response money from discretionary funds, victim assistance. Faith Friendship is in a unique position because we aren't just a caretaker, we were his employer. And so our victims deserve justice and they deserve healing and they deserve to move on. And if Faith Friendship doesn't receive support to survive this for the next couple of years while we heal and rebuild, then all of our residents are going to have to be relocated to God knows where, because there are no rooms at the inn, ladies and gentlemen, especially, those that could specialize in helping our residents and their needs. Now, God is good and he loves our residents more than we ever could, but that doesn't mean that we don't want to fight. So I've asked for help over and over and over again, and I've received none. And so we are in a position where we are going public with this story, with our appeal. We've tried to leverage our properties to use some of the equity to fund the crisis. We filed for an ERC only to get it not stumped, but held up in the moratorium. That's over $500,000, legitimate ERC. Several things that we've done to try to help bridge the gap until we can actually begin to fundraise and write grants again and the legal issues are resolved. Is the message that we send to these residents who love us and one another that they should be punished for their courage to speak up and to expose their abuser? Because that's the message we'd be sending, friends. That you spoke up. You spoke up and you exposed your abuser, and now you're losing your housing and your family. The villa is a place where faith and friendship create family. And so they're not just having to move to another location. They're being disconnected from the very stabilizing factor, the roots that they've come to trust and love. Now, yeah, we have some newer residents, but even they say that they have improved so much. Their relationships improved. Some of them have restored relationships with estranged family members outside of the villa. They've stabilized. They're doing better than they ever have. Faith Friendships program, our personal care home, is helping to change and transform lives, but it's loving people. So we need to find a way to stay open. And now I'll be forced to tell the staff, to tell my management team, even to tell our residents that we're in real financial trouble and we need a miracle. And I've done everything I know to do as a businesswoman and as a leader, and everything our board of directors has asked me to do. And so now we need to appeal to the public. And it breaks my heart that I even have to say this to our residents, that if something doesn't turn around in the next 60 days, that we would be forced to look at closing. After 22 plus years of faithfully serving the community, the evil actions of one person could potentially be the reason that Faith Friendship has to end. Now, I don't know the will of God in this, but I know that judgment starts in the house of God first. And I know that we are in a season, brothers and sisters, where God is exposing evil. He's taking leaders out and placing new ones in. He is pouring out his spirit. He is shaking things up. And we cooperate with that. We agree with that. He is God. We are not. He is faithful. He is good. And so we know that he is leading us through this, even though the light on the feet and the lamp on the path is really dim. We know that he is good. So this message is to tell you a story of an organization that has faithfully served, sadly had someone doing evil in our midst, unknown to us, but also the same organization that, not at the request or suggestion of any agency or any law enforcement or regulatory or support or service agency, not at their request, but at the request of God, went and found what was there. We agree with exposing sin and evil. And that's what we did. We went after it. Now, if we hadn't It's very likely that we could be sitting here with one person who alleged abuse. This man was charged for it, and that would be it. But we don't believe that's the right thing to do. Remember the more is what God said. So we're asking you to help. We're asking you to share this message. We're asking you to start peer-to-peer fundraising. We're asking you to donate. We're asking you to share this with your church or with your business. We're asking you to help us keep Faith Friendship open and alive. Help us, give us time to heal and to rebuild, because I believe that Faith Friendship Ministries can be a future model for personal care homes to come. Why do I say that? Why would you possibly say that, Tammy? Because, friends, the model that we have outside of the crisis that we're in, it works. And with mental health or mental illness being at an all-time high, a known all-time high, and the income and wealth of Americans being less than it was for those that are in nursing homes and assisted living right now, they don't have the same money saved. When they come of age, all they're going to have is Social Security disability. Social Security or disability. They're not going to have these healthy retirement plans to afford $4,000, $5,000, $10,000 a month, whatever it'll be in 10 years. Over 450 personal care homes have closed in the state of Pennsylvania just since 2015. 11 closed last year. Many of them are private owned. And when you're only receiving 50% of what you need in order to care for them well, you only have two choices. You either put your own money in the pot to bridge the deficit if you're a private business, or you skimp on services to residents, and that can't last forever either. So the nonprofit model in general works. If Faith Friendship had an endowment or had 6 to 12 months of expenses in the bank in the event of a crisis or a downturn or whatever, then I probably wouldn't even be doing this video. But the reality is we didn't. We were on our way towards that. And then we got, as one of our board members said, we got a gut punch. Now, I am grateful that that evil was exposed. I am grateful that he's being sentenced next week, and that our residents will be able to put a period on this part of their journey. But the reality is we need your help. And I'm asking you, if you are watching this video thinking, well, they should shut down, there ain't no way that they didn't know, and on and on and on and on and on. If that's the path that you're taking, then thank you for listening, but this isn't for you. But if you are that person who's watching this and you're saying, you know what? They did it right. You know what? Sometimes these things happen and people just don't see it. You know what? They're going to be better. They're going to have stronger sexual abuse. They're going to have stronger supervision. They're going to have stronger and better whatever. And yes, we are working on all of those things. But they deserve, those residents, those precious individuals deserve to be able to keep their home. They were brave beyond what some of us will ever even comprehend. They were brave, and it would send a